This is Tech and Politics, and my name is Andreas Jungherr. Welcome back to the podcast accompanying the lecture series Digital Media in Politics and Society at the University of Bamberg. In the upcoming 2 episodes, we will be talking about artificial intelligence and its impact on democracy. We will start by discussing AI's role in elections and its impact on people's information autonomy. In the previous 2 episodes, we have discussed what type of artificial intelligence we are currently experiencing in the wild and the preconditions for this AI to be deployed in narrowly defined computational areas. We now turn to how this connects to democracy. Unsurprisingly, the discussion of and literature on democracy is vast and multifaceted. Discussions range from the philosophical foundations, normative ideals, historical expressions, empirical variations, to legal and procedural questions. But 3 important characteristics of democracy consistently feature in these discussions. These are free and fair elections as a process to establish the basis for collectively binding decision-making, and believe in the ability of people to make decisions for themselves about societal and political questions. And thirdly, equality of people with regard to representation and rights. Each of these characteristics is touched by developments in the field of AI to different degrees. This impact is clearly felt by the current applications of narrow AI. Accordingly, we should discuss these questions without resorting to science fiction scenarios of imaginary artificial general intelligence. Artificial intelligence raises questions with regard to the integrity of elections as an adjudication process for the conflict between political factions. In the age of the perceived predictability of people's political attitudes and behavior, can there be free and fair elections in which each faction conceivably might rise to power? Is it still plausible that people are able to make political and societal decisions? For one, are information environments shaped by artificial intelligence based on the preferences of people still adequate to the task of creating informed publics able to form political opinions according to their interests? Going further, are scenarios provided by AI to experts about the future of complex issues such as the climate, pandemics, geopolitical conflict, or finance, not better decision makers than the people following their passions and their interests? How does democratic decision making hold up against this new environment? Can we still meaningfully speak of equality of rights and representation among people if AI-based systems discriminate against minorities or the underprivileged? How do the known biases inherent in AI systems translate to democratic politics? Even more fundamentally, what does equality even mean when AI contributes to massive power imbalances between the companies running and developing AI and everyone else, including the government? To some commentators, AI might also provide an opportunity for autocracies to get a leg up on democracies in the detection and solution to societal and political challenges. Traditionally, democracies were seen to be better at soliciting information about the state of their society or effects of interventions compared to autocracies. This information benefit was seen as one reason for democracies being able to outperform autocracies. AI might offset this benefit and allow autocracies to pass democracies by. Admittedly, in answering these questions, there's a certain amount of speculation involved. As discussed in the previous episodes, much current AI is still in a preliminary and rather limited usage mode. In fact, AI might never transcend this current state. But to get a sense of how AI might impact democracy going further, we can start here. One central strength of democracies is the role of elections as adjudication process of political conflict between different factions in society. By providing factions the very real opportunity to win or lose power in regular elections, democracies channel political conflict institutionally. But for this channeling of conflict to hold, each faction must feel the very real opportunity to win power in future elections. Otherwise, why bother with elections? Why not choose a different way to gain power? In the words of Adam Tsiorski, democracy is a system of organized uncertainty. And I quote, "Actors know what is possible, since the possible outcomes are entailed by the institutional framework. They know what is likely to happen because the probability of particular outcomes is determined jointly by the institutional framework and the resources that the different political forces bring to the competition. What they do not know is what particular outcome will occur. They know what winning or losing can mean to them, and they know how likely they are to win or lose. But they do not know if they will lose or win." End quote. Artificial intelligence applications promise to offset this organized uncertainty of who will lose and who will win elections. Ideas of being able to correctly predict elections or the behavior of voters go back to the early days of the computer age, the 1950s. In his 1955 story, Franchise, science fiction author Isaac Asimov has the computer system Multivac calculate election results based on the input of one specifically chosen person. In the late 1950s, a set of eclectic scientists and engineers founded the Simulmatics Corporation with the goal to predict human behavior and support political campaigns based on computer models. Among the client roster was later President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. More recently, the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama used data-driven models to predict the likely behavior of voters. While we can discuss the degree to which each of these examples qualifies as AI, in each we encounter the idea of being able to use available information to infer unknown outcomes. This could happen on an individual level, where available information might include attitudes revealed in a survey, attitudes inferred based on behavior or choice, such as buying a specific brand of consumer good, driving a specific car, or donating money, or documented behavior, such as turning out to vote. This information would be used to infer future behavior, such as vote choice, the decision to turn out to vote, or the willingness to donate money. Alternatively, this could also happen on the system level, taking aggregate information, such as the state of the economy or general approval ratings, to predict the outcome of an election without modeling individual behavior. In other words, artificial intelligence might contribute to the lowering of uncertainty about who will win or lose in democratic elections. We can see the promise of AI in this context as a continuation of earlier promises connected with data-driven campaigning. Barack Obama's presidential campaigns in 2008 and 2012 still serve as the watermark in the use of data-driven practices in political campaigns. The Obama campaign was very vocal about collecting large amounts of data about potential voters and campaign supporters. These data were then used to construct models on how to organize the voter outreach or research collection for the campaign. The campaign built models on the likelihood of specific voters to vote for Obama, turn out to vote, or to react positively to campaign outreach. They also built models predicting how to maximize the input of their supporters, for example, with regard to donations. The campaign also ran a turnout model predicting the outcome of both elections with greater precision than the networks and professional pollsters. The Obama campaign can therefore serve as an example for what data-driven solutions in political campaigning can provide and where problems emerge. For one, predicting the behavior of specific voters is difficult and unlikely to be solved through purely data-driven approaches. As discussed, voting is a sparse activity. People only vote comparatively seldom, and the context of these vote choices vary greatly. Predicting this behavior automatically seems an elusive goal. The uncertainty of who will win elections will thus remain alive in the foreseeable future. Still, the Obama campaigns also demonstrate that campaign organizations can be successful in developing data-driven models of behavior of great relevance to the campaign. For example, the probability to turn out to vote or to donate money. This might fall short of predicting the vote downright, but still might be helpful to a campaign and give it a competitive advantage over the competition. At the same time, the subsequent fate of Obama's successor as Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton in 2016 and the victory by Republican nominee Donald Trump show that even such a seemingly decisive predictive advantage as developed by Obama and his team is hard to maintain over time. Any AI-based advantage might therefore be fleeting and accordingly might not contribute to a decisive lowering of the organized uncertainty of electoral politics in democracies. Leaving parties and campaign organizations for a moment, AI might conceivably also impact the ability of powerful companies or governments to predict the outcome of elections or mood swings of the public. Campaigns or parties might simply have too little data, not enough computing power, or simply not enough talent to capitalize on the opportunities of AI. But this is not necessarily true for large companies developing AI in other areas, or governments able to use the services of these companies or be able to coerce them. But the nature of the challenge to predict vote choice still remains an unlikely target for successful AI-based predictions. Here, the impression of them being able to predict or even intervene in the outcome of elections with the public might be enough to undermine and delegitimize elections. The successes of AI in various societal and political fields might thus lend credence to narratives of widespread uses of AI, even in areas where it objectively has little purchase. Overall, the impact of AI on elections therefore seems limited, given the inherent scarcity of the predicted activity, voting. Indirect effects are possible by providing parties or campaign organizations with the opportunities of competitive differentiation. Whether this can translate into a consistent and systemic shift of power between parties or political actors is doubtful, though, given the broad availability of AI tools. More likely is another sort of indirect impact. By transposing expectations regarding the supposed powers of AI from industry and science to politics, the public might come to expect that governments or companies providing AI solutions might be able to predict the political behavior of people or the outcome of the election. So, while AI might not be able to offset the organized uncertainty regarding the prospective outcome of elections, it might give the impression of being able to. This alone might be enough to weaken public trust in elections and the acceptance of re-election results by factions deeming themselves at a systematic disadvantage. Consequently, it is important to keep organized uncertainty alive in the face of AI and not weaken it through irresponsible and fantastical speculations. One tenet of democracy is that those who are ruled by a government should also be the ones who choose it. This idea of self-rule is as well a normative idea about legitimizing the temporal power of rulers over the ruled. It is also a practical idea about distributed decision-making being superior to other more centralized forms of decision-making or rule by experts. AI directly impacts these normative and practical considerations. A crucial precondition for people making decisions in democracies is their ability for free expression and information. Without expressing opinions, interests, and concerns in public, There is no representation of the body politic and its respective factions. Just as important is the opportunity for people to keep themselves informed, either habitually by regularly following the news or incident-driven in moments of great concern to them or public scandals. Without access to an information environment providing critical coverage of political elites and societal trends and offering access to multiple viewpoints representing different societal groups or political factions, democratic decision-making by the people lacks its basis. Both free expression and the access to information are potentially impacted by AI. How can people decide for themselves if they lose the ability for free expression in algorithmically moderated information environments? The moderation of speech in digital information environments is a topic of growing importance. In light of the use of digital media in support of extremist movements all over the world as a platform for discriminatory or hateful language targeted at individuals, its role in the propaganda efforts of countries intent at shaping political opinion abroad, or the distribution of misleading health information during the COVID pandemic, the moderation of speech online is at the top of the agenda of regulators and public commentators. As legal scholar Evelyn Douek has pointed out, to deal effectively with the sheer volume of content, this moderation increasingly will rely on artificial intelligence to identify and moderate harmful speech. But it is easy to see the value in the opportunity to automatically identify and suppress instances of discriminatory or hateful speech and misleading information, endangering the stability of societies or people's health. This is a slippery slope. Even if the intention is not to use these practices to regulate political speech, the probabilistic nature of AI-based content moderation means that the borders might be more fleeting than envisioned. More troubling still, as for example Warner has shown, in the past, factions outside the political mainstream and minorities consciously chose forms of expression that were offensive to mainstream discourse or dominant publics in order to manifest their challenge to the status quo. These forms of expression are potential targets of AI-based moderation of offensive speech. This would translate into suppression of relevant political speech. In the beginning, this exclusion of offensive political speech might contribute to a general feeling of accomplishment. But this does not solve political conflict. Instead, it suppresses and hides it. In the mid to long term, this risks exacerbating conflict and pushing it outside the realm of democratic competition. This will weaken democracy. AI-based moderation needs transparency and external audits in order to establish that it indeed does not suppress political expression by outside factions or minorities deemed offensive by a majority. But as the example above has shown, this might not be enough. Given the political nature of offensive speech, instead of relying on automated moderation and suppression, open societies might have to accept a certain degree of unruliness in digital communication environments. Instead on automated guardians, we should rely more on the epistemic vigilance of publics and the strength of public discourse to weed out bad ideas and discriminatory actors. How can people decide for themselves if they lose the ability to inform themselves? The growing importance of digital platforms as access points for many people to news and information more broadly has raised concerns about the impact of algorithmically shaped information environments. Probably the most well-known of those is the filter bubble, put forward by the political activist Eli Pariser. Pariser worried about algorithms putting only information in front of people that supported their political worldview and thereby reinforcing pre-existing beliefs instead of challenging people by providing them with competing opinions or worldviews. If true, the filter bubble would force people into algorithmic cages hiding potentially relevant information from them. Over time, people would therefore lose the ability to form grounded political opinions and lose the ability for informed political decision-making. Luckily, empirical studies have found little evidence of algorithmically shaped information environments contributing to a meaningfully reduced diversity in the information people are exposed to. Still, concerns remain. For one, it could be that algorithms pick up on information that increases our likelihood to click, comment, or share, and increase our exposure to emotionally stimulating information. As the political psychologist Jamie Settle has shown, this might be information that we disagree with and that stimulate our voicing outrage or disgust and increase our salience of political conflict. They're different and contradicting ways in which algorithmically shaped information environments might lead to deterioration in the ability of people to encounter information they need to form political opinions and come to meaningfully grounded decisions. Well, the actual effects of algorithmically shaped information environments is heavily contested among scientists. Without doubt, we need greater transparency about algorithms employed in the shaping of information environments. This also includes the establishment of regular external audits establishing the effects of AI on the information visible on online platforms and the nature and kind of information that is amplified and the information that is muted. How can people decide for themselves if AI helps communicators to become better at manipulating them or the political process? If we switch our perspective from structures people use for expression or information, there's another area where AI might negatively impact individual informational autonomy. AI might allow communicators to predict the reactions of people to their communicative interventions. In an ideal world, at least from the perspective of professional communicators, this would enable them to contact us in exactly the right way to shift our opinion or behavior. Sanders and Schneier present a thought experiment illustrating a scenario how AI might be used by lobbyists to predict the likelihood of success of bills introduced by them to legislators. But currently, far from realization, the example shows the logic by which AI can be used by interested parties to increase the resources available to them and potentially intervene targetedly to get people to behave in ways beneficial to them. If true, AI would thus enable interested parties to manipulate people to act against their better interests and weaken the case for the fitness of people to decide their political fates themselves. A first taste of this conflict was given in the discussion about the role of the English consultancy firm Cambridge Analytica in the success of Donald Trump. The consultants claimed to be able to predict which piece of information displayed on Facebook was necessary to get people to behave in ways beneficial to their clients. By now, the company's claims have been sufficiently debunked, but the episode shows the perceived power of AI to shift people's electoral behavior and the subsequent distrust in the ability of people to decide on their own interest. But AI does not only highlight the weaknesses in people making political decisions for themselves, it also increases the power of experts. This shifts the question of whether the people can decide for themselves to whether they should. AI increases the power of experts to develop predictions, be it in the modeling of societal, economic, ecological, or geopolitical trends. AI increases the powers of experts, at least symbolically as a manifestation of the incontestable authority. Based on these scenarios, experts advise governments on the options available for action. In consequence, this leads to reduction of the option space available for democratic decision-making. We see this with regard to areas as diverse as climate change, global pandemics, or finance. In these cases, experts present AI-supported scenarios, predicting which course of action presumably leads to the envisioned goals. Never mind that action based on predictions like this in reality often lead to different results as those expected. AI-based scenarios enable experts to present a new case on why democratic decision-making should be limited to an option space predetermined by them, often presented by them with the TINA axiom: there is no alternative. There might be good reasons to follow the AI-supported predictions by experts, but the AI-powered claim to knowledge about the future should not be accepted on faith. If AI-based predictions are used to limit the option space for democratic decision-making, they need to be presented transparently and open to external audits regarding the underlying models. Also, their output cannot automatically translate into politics. Experts do not rule in democracy, even if they might be right. They need politicians who advocate policies based on their advice and try to gain majorities. This process might take longer and seem frustrating to those agreeing on the way forward, but it ensures the societal support necessary in democracies. Should AI shift this balance of power in the direction of expert rule, this would be a detrimental effect on democracy. These examples show different ways in which the growing use of AI might lead to deterioration in the informational autonomy of people underlying their ability to form political opinions and make political decisions necessary in a democracy. At the same time, there are various avenues forward with regard to transparency and external audits that might help for AI to strengthen the quality of information available to people in democracies and therefore support them in their democratic decision-making. At the same time, the alternative approach of treating AI as a black box and hiding AI-enabled decision-making behind a facade of efficiency and convenience would lead to a weakening of democracy. But danger lies not in AI as such, but in the way we choose to use it. Well, on that bombshell, let's close for now. In the coming episode, we'll continue our exploration of how artificial intelligence is impacting democracy. Then, we will discuss how artificial intelligence impacts equality between people and coming power shifts between societies, some of them democratic, some of them not. As always, come Thursday, the script to this episode can be found online on the course website, digitalmedia.andreasjungherr.de. There, you will find detailed sources, references to further reading, links, and preparatory questions for the exam. This was Tech and Politics, the podcast of the Chair for the Governance of Complex and Innovative Technological Systems at the University of Bamberg. I'm Andreas Jungherr. Have fun reading, and see you soon.